Hey y'all, Justin here, and we're back with another Whiteboard Wednesday. And so today we're going to be looking at strategies for PMS and even PMDD. But before we go into that, I want to talk a bit about the background and even the pathogenesis and why it develops, right, for roughly 70 to 90% of women. Now, you may have heard that it often gets misdiagnosed as anxiety, depression, agoraphobia, even panic attacks, and can even mimic symptoms of hypothyroidism, okay? So PMS, as you probably know, contains, physical, psychological, and behavioral changes that can include bloating, right? Muscle and joint pain, acne, weight gain, panic attacks, like I said, poor sleep, irritability, mood swings, behavioral changes, food cravings, loss of motivation, paranoia, right? And it can even align with histamine type issues like hives and congestion. Now, PMDD accounts for probably somewhere between, we think, 3 to 6, 7% of the population. And multiple studies have found that, traumatic stress or even PTSD can increase a woman's odds of developing PMDD, right? The psychological emotional element that feeds into the physiology. So there are several different mechanisms that have been tied to PMS, a lot of which we don't really have a clear understanding of, but there are a couple that we've identified in the research. And so one of them is inflammation, right? Obviously you have physical pain during, your PMS time. And so we know that there are, inflammatory pathways that are triggered, like your COX-2, and they make prostaglandins, which cause pain, okay? These are chemicals that cause pain, and Advil essentially suppressing that, right? We also have neurotransmitter imbalances, okay? And we find that there are deficiencies in serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, right? And they obviously relate to your mood, right? And then there is an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone. Now, they're both generally higher, right? In your luteal phase, your progesterone is higher, but estrogen can still be high, and it is often higher. So we have a higher estrogen-progesterone ratio. And you should understand that progesterone helps with GABA, right? GABA is doing its calming work. So if you have a low progesterone, right, it's going to obviously impact your ability to make GABA, which is, basically allowing you to relax and feel calm. So sex hormones have a broad systemic effect on the body, where too much or too little creates symptoms. And also the varying estrogen and progesterone levels alter the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which is a fancy way of saying it helps regulate your blood pressure and water retention and stuff like that, which is why you have bloating and swelling during your luteal phase, okay? And then lastly, it dysregulated hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, okay? So we find that there's a dampened stress response. So high levels of estrogen cause a higher level of what's known as cortical binding globulin, which essentially causes less cortisol to float around in the body and exert its effects, helping you adapt to stress. So it's really believed that HPA dysregulation affects also allopregnenolone, which is a metabolite of progesterone that can also contribute to mood changes. So while it may be easy to perceive that PMS is attributed to the effect that estrogen and progesterone has on the body and affecting your neurotransmitters, thus affecting your mood, sex hormones really can't explain everything, as you can see here, and there's actually other sort of factors we found in the research that can contribute to PMS. Okay, so the research actually has shown that women who don't have PMS, they actually don't have much lower estrogen and progesterone levels compared to someone who does have PMS. So they're almost equal to a large degree, and so that tells us that there are other factors involved, right? So some of these would be, thyroid issues, right? PMS can mimic hypothyroidism, and there may be subclinical hypothyroidism where, meds are warranted, okay? And we have blood sugar issues, right? Insulin, blood sugar dysregulation is a big one. Essential fatty acid deficiencies, so omega-3s, right? We know omega-3s are helpful for reducing inflammation. We have hyperprolactinemia, okay? So high prolactin decreases progesterone, and high prolactin occurs because there's often a decrease in dopamine. So low dopamine occurs from stress and inflammation, things like that. And so PMS women actually have a higher sensitivity to levels of prolactin. And so when that happens, you actually have a decrease in some of the anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, and they're important for helping with pain, obviously, and reducing dysmenorrhea, which is the other term for painful cycles. So that's why things like gamma-linolenic acid, evening primrose oil, black currant seed oil, borage oil, those are all really good in helping with that. Moving on though, we have electrolyte imbalances. Too much caffeine can actually cause this PMS issue too and worsen it. And then low vitamin status. So B6, vitamin B6 is a big one because it's a cofactor in a lot of enzymes, and it helps with literally almost everything if you're taking the right amount. So it'll help with fatigue, irritability, depression. Magnesium is often deficient for a lot of women, and that's important for mood. And vitamin A, and there's vitamin E, calcium, zinc deficiencies are pretty common as well. And then obviously emotional stress and the psychosocial factors of life can easily contribute to inflammation and pain, perceived pain. Okay, so let's look at histamine intolerance briefly. Now the reason why is because histamine can actually stimulate the immune system, which can obviously exacerbate inflammation, right? And if you have histamine intolerance, then this is obviously a very relevant topic. So excess histamine can look a lot like PMS. If you have histamine intolerance, they can make PMS worse because it has the ability to trigger luteinizing hormone, which comes from the brain and stimulates your ovaries to make estrogen. And that can put you in potentially a higher estrogen dominant state. But it feeds right back into the cycle of estrogen stimulating your mast cells, which make histamine, right? So histamine feeds in estrogen, and then estrogen feeds back into the production of histamine. So that's why this is important to understand. Now, aside from too much estrogen worsening histamine issues, we can have pathogenic bugs in your gut that can make histamine. So that's why you may want to rule out SIBO, for example. And then we have the obvious high histamine foods that can worsen things, and why you're probably wanting to reduce intake of, smoked meats, fermented foods, yeast, chocolate, tomatoes, eggplants, spinach, things like that. Now, if you have histamine intolerance, doing all of these things will help with PMS. All right, so let's take a quick look at diet. Obviously, this can have a pivotal role in mitigating your PMS symptoms, okay? And so dairy is a big no-no for a lot of people because of the fact that animal products contain hormones like estrogen, and you know why it's a problem. Caffeine and alcohol typically need to be reduced, in my experience, and eliminating it completely is probably the way to go. And the reason why is because caffeine and alcohol rob you of your B vitamins, and so B vitamins are incredibly important in your liver detoxification, making neurotransmitters, a lot of things, okay? High sugar carbs, obviously, they will relieve symptoms in the short term. Obviously, food cravings are a big issue with women who have PMS, right? But in the long term, it can exacerbate the issue and potentially decrease magnesium, cause fluid retention. So eating carbs may help you, but you really want to control the amount. I'm not saying you can't have carbs or advising you to do that, but you also don't want to be hanging out at a Cheesecake Factory every day, okay? So high sodium, obviously you're going to experience a lot of retention, waterfall sodium, right? So if you have edema, that's potentially why. You got a lot of salt during that time of the month. So natural diuretics can be helpful for this. So, parsley is what I like to use a lot, and even evening primrose oil. So those are two to consider. And other foods though that you can really focus on to help relieve PMS though, 1 week prior to the onset of symptoms would be like, ginger, it would be orange peels, it would be spinach, hawthorn berries, I like cinnamon, what else? Onions. Those are some ideas of what to do, but if you only did those things, it probably wouldn't get you very far, but it's something to probably consider integrate into your diet. Now, obviously, some of the conventional treatment options for PMS and PMDD look a lot like this. We have hormone replacement therapy, and so that can be considered and actually necessary, and it's effective when given typically transdermally or orally during days 14, the last 2 weeks of your cycle. So that is something that you and your doctor can work through. Now, GnRH agonists, okay, these are, again, all these things are more or less Band-Aids, right? Let's be truthful here. but doesn't mean you can't use them, right? But GnRH agonists are things that will help disrupt or interrupt the ovulatory cycle. And we also have hormonal birth control, obviously. Now, as far as mood goes, it's not uncommon to see anxiolytics, so benzodiazepines, Xanax, and then SSRIs, Prozac, Zoloft, things like that, which can help you when you're really dealing with a lot of mood issues. So people with PMDD generally, I see, use this stuff in the short term, which can be really helpful. But just remember that this stuff is something that you may need, that you work through with your doctor, but there are other strategies that I'm going to share with you in a bit here that you can use alongside this, hopefully, to make your life a lot easier. All right, so let's check out some supplements here that I recommend for PMS and PMDD. And these are mostly vitamins here, but then I'll get into botanicals and herbs that will help you as well. Now, bear in mind that all this I'm suggesting has been shown in the research to help with reducing PMS. So first up, we have magnesium. Most people in America are deficient in magnesium, so it would not hurt you at all to take a supplement of this every day, especially during your luteal phase. Somewhere between 400 to 600, maybe even more, milligrams per day. It'll help with reducing anxiety, irritability, breast tenderness, things like that. Vitamin B6, like I mentioned before, is a cofactor in enzymatic reactions. It will help with reducing estrogen dominance. It will help with increased progesterone. And tryptophan. So this is an amino acid that is in food. However, most people don't have enough, and you generally need more because it's also a precursor to neurotransmitters, essentially, right, which affect your mood, obviously. So it's really helpful, actually, for people who have PMDD. So I generally will get up to about 2,000 milligrams per day, but even more than that sometimes. But that's a good starting point. All right, but the caveat here is not to take this if you're on SSRIs or MAOIs, drugs like that. Calcium is another one that a lot of women are deficient in, but it's important to make sure that you have adequate intake because it will really will help with your mood and concentration. Calcium has sort of like fluctuations during the menstrual cycle that may explain some of the features of PMS. All right, so otherwise we got zinc, okay, and zinc is from food, right? It can be found in a multi, but a lot of people, depending on what your diet looks like, you can be deficient in it. So low zinc status and coupled with a high prolactin level actually can really dampen progesterone. Now we have borage oil, black currant seed oil, evening primrose oil, these sort of things I mentioned before that you can take from 3,000 to 6,000 milligrams per day that will help with basically reducing inflammation, right? So that's why we look towards that. Fish oil will do the same thing, obviously. Make sure you're definitely getting that in or finding some way to get omega-3s in your diet. And then curcumin is the last one. That's been shown to really help with inflammation, as you might assume. It's pretty popular these days. And yeah, those are my vitamins for you. All right, so let's look at some of the botanicals here. And so chasteberry, or Vitex in other words, is a very popular one that I generally like to use a lot. You probably have before, or maybe you currently are. And so this one will help with reducing luteinizing hormone, which ultimately helps with decreasing, or really balancing out the progesterone-estrogen ratio. It really acts sort of like an adaptogen in a way. So it will help with that and reducing prolactin. And so black cohosh is another one. This one will help with spasms. It's like a relaxant. It's a sedative. It helps balance estrogen as well. But there are some contraindications for it, so make sure you check on that, especially with potential liver issues that you may have. St. John's wort. Okay, this is a really good one that the research has been really clear that helps with mild to moderate depression. It helps with anxiety, irritability, mood swings, feeling like a loss of control. But again, you want to check on your medications and see if there's any sort of conflict. All right. Ginkgo is another one I like, and this one really can act like a blood thinner, and so you don't want to take this if you're on a blood thinner med, obviously. Saffron is one I like a lot. This one will help with PMS relief across the board. Lavender is another one for anxiety, right? Depression, sleep issues, perhaps. Motherwort's another one with menstrual pain. And then dandelion leaf is another one. But overall, I really like to use St. John's wort, those depression issues, mental health issues, Vitex, chaseberry, and then saffron. Those are my top 3, actually. One other thing you can do if you're interested is next time you take a bath, right, put some Epsom salts in it, and then add in a couple drops, like 2 or 3 drops of lavender oil, grapefruit oil, and clary sage oil. Mix that in and then breathe that in. That'll help you, I think. Now, I've actually found it to be quite useful actually with our clients. So lastly, what I'll say is getting your mental, psychological stress under control is probably one of the most important things above everything else I mentioned here. Now, I know what you're saying, it seems kind of backwards because you have inflammation, you have all these physiological issues that are contributing to your mood issues, but here's the thing, we have control of everything else that's outside of us, right? So getting away from toxic people, toxic situations, taking time for yourself, all those things are really one of the easiest, not easy in theory, but not easy to do, but it's one of the most actionable, accessible things that we can do to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and reduce inflammation and all the symptoms we're dealing with. Especially if you have PMDD, you can't really afford to screw around with that stuff. All right, so that's why you really want to, look towards massage and rest and relaxation therapies, yoga, guided imagery, hypnotherapy, whatever. Like anything like that, you like to do exercise, of course, sauna, whatever. Sit in a hammock for 5 hours, I don't care, but make sure you really look towards things like that and focus on you and get away from all the shit outside of the world, all right? All right, my friends, that concludes today's Whiteboard Wednesday on PMS and PMDD. I hope you found that very useful and you have some things to take away that you can start implementing next time you have a PMS issue. So thanks for tuning in. I will catch you next time.